Sounds mostly good, except for these user numbers that are disappointing. What's standing out to you right now?
So right now, I'm just looking at, they changed how they calculate user numbers recently and added an extra element, which is these SMS users. And if you include those, they look great. But if you don't include those, the core user growth is only up by 2 million in the quarter.
So, Brian, what do you think? Good, the bad, and the ugly here?
Well, I've argued that the user base doesn't really matter, although I realize investors are focused on it primarily because management's been focused on it. And you could argue that that's a disappointment, certainly. I think as people unpeel the numbers, you can see the U.S. User growth was flat. If you assume there's any churn, that means that they basically grew to replace churn, and that's probably not going to be well received. But my argument has been Twitter's always been a niche service. The point is that they monetize it reasonably well, and it's going to have a role.
Okay, so let's talk about revenue then. Ad revenue growth had been slowing down. The numbers today do look slightly better. Jim, you help brands manage their profiles on social media, places like Twitter, places like Facebook. How would you gauge the health of Twitter's long-term ad strategy?
I think it's very healthy. I think what you're seeing primarily in social is that they're starting to follow the traditional economics of television, which is it comes down to reach and frequency and how immersive you can make the experience. So on one side, of course, the user number is critical. At the end of the day, the platforms are going to be judged on how many people they can reach. But at the same time, the ad platform from Twitter continues to get better. There can't be enough said about what they're doing from the new product that specifically is helping them in real time, and the idea that real-time engagement is something that Twitter can provide almost better than any major media company, especially as more and more media goes to being time-shifted.
All right, a lot of stuff happening here, Sarah. You've got potentially hundreds of people who've left Twitter just since Jack took over as interim CEO. They're looking for a new CEO. Square, his other company, has filed to go public, so we don't know where that leaves him. At the same time, two key executives we're hearing just minutes, in the last few minutes, someone going to Dropbox, someone going to YouTube. You're going to be speaking with Jack, his very first earnings call ever as a public company CEO. What are you going to ask him?
I want to know if he actually is in the running still to be CEO. I don't think we have clarity on that yet. I mean, people still mention his name as a possibility, even though the board has said they're not going to take him as long as he's CEO of Square. So I want a definitive answer, I'm sure Wall Street does too, on whether he's staying at Square or is still considering this. And I also want to hear if he has any updates for these product announcements that they've been meaning to roll out, of when we're going to see Project Lightning. You talked about how they were trying to put events in such a way that you could watch them like channels for these users who aren't even logged in.
Right. So, lots of interesting product stuff happening. Sometimes I look down at my feed and I'm seeing these delayed tweets, which I know they're trying to show you what's most relevant, but I just wanted to see what came out seconds ago.
But all these interesting product updates supposed to happen as these two key product executives just left.
Right.
So it'll be an interesting interrogation.
Interesting. At the same time, Jack, he's been out there. He's been tweeting at Kim Kardashian, who's asking for product changes. He's periscoping the earnings call today for the very first time. Brian, what do you think about this whole CEO transition? What do you think is best for this company?
It's really difficult to identify who's the right person for the company because only those who are on the inside or very close to the inside will really know what the political landscape is internally. You don't want to lose any of the really important people, if you're the board, who might want to move on if the wrong person is put into the CEO spot. And anticipating who exactly is going to win, it's just impossible to do from the outside.
I want to bring in our senior markets correspondent, Julie Hyman, who's been pulling more numbers out of this report. Julie, what are you seeing? I know you've been looking at international growth.
Yeah, it looks like in terms of user growth, a lot of it is coming from international. In terms of the additions, the company adding 36 million users internationally. The U.S. added just 6 million. And as you guys have been talking about, a lot of that are the so-called fast followers, which thankfully Sarah explained to me a little bit earlier before we came on air. Something else that I wanted to point out that actually happened as we were watching these earnings come out and that I emailed you about, Emily, was a couple of executive departures for the company. Todd Jackson, the director of product management, Christian Ostline, vice president of product management, are leaving the company. The first for Dropbox, the latter for YouTube at Google. And it's, again, interesting timing that this would come at the same time that the company is making this earnings announcement today, Emily.
Right. Now, one of those people was the head of growth, and Jack's saying today that he's not satisfied with growth. James, I want to ask you because, you speak to your clients all the time, and I wonder, what do they think they're getting out of Twitter that they're not getting out of Facebook? What else would they like to see from Twitter?
Well, you brought it up earlier with the Kim Kardashian tweet moment. What I hear, I was with a client, a Fortune 250 client this morning. The challenge often with Twitter is the customer service approach that a lot of brands have to take too. Facebook did a fantastic job 3 or 4 years ago really moving customer service off of Facebook and into the back office of Facebook. And Twitter, it's still apparent, it's still on the front seat, and brands still feel like customer service is oftentimes the first thing they focus on as it relates to Twitter. And anyone that knows a marketing department knows customer service usually sits in a very different seat than brand marketing and really where the ad revenue of marketing sits. And I just believe that long term, they've really got to figure out the strategy to how they move customer service away from the core platform in order to really allow brands to focus on their core marketing principles on Twitter.